because it's actually cupping you in a kind of a volume. Very smart.
In my dome.
Yeah, very good.
I'm gonna stop my video so I could share my screen.
Yeah.
Can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Let's do it. So as you can see, we have decided to go with Beirut International Airport. So we're now entering a new era of cities where we should look into multiple directions simultaneously. So right before we kick it off, it's the best for us to look in the past when communities were compact and functionally autonomous with strong social ties, but also look to the future, taking advantage of new and exciting distributed and ultimately autonomous systems to deliver food, water, energy resources, and mobility to the people. So we basically divided the presentation into 5 main parts that we'll go through thoroughly. So chapter 1, building on the chronology of history to create a trajectory of like a future-proof city. We've decided to go with Beirut, given the very various aspects that the context itself has faced for the past, I don't know, many years. So visiting these found infrastructures, we're basically asking ourselves, how could they be rethought? I mean, how will they change? How will they revitalize the context as we look at historical artifacts and nature, given the context? So with regards to new technologies and emerging cities, how can we basically infuse those ideas? What aspects within the overall could produce more oxygenated environments? So we already know that Lebanon has been the door for the East and the West for quite a long time, given the pre-BC periods where, Phoenicians were known for exchange and basically used to make their vessels out of cedar tree wood. It's been a really relevant kind of entity within the Lebanese culture throughout history, the cedar tree. So basically revolving around that icon as a starting point. So we also tend to bring something so close to the culture and context and make ties with infrastructure and interconnectivity. So extensions of the city and urban contexts are now merging with transportational hubs. Also, given this really kind of unequal development in the region has kind of provoked us to provide something that not only gives some sort of transportational solution or an infrastructural one, but takes it a step beyond that. So it's not just an idea of urbanism or nature versus urbanism, but it's a confluence of all those positions within the future of the architecture of the city we're creating. Also looking at the political and social kind of turmoils that Lebanon has been through, as well as the recent historic major events that have shifted the country's destiny in a way. We see this as an opportunity to change, do something about it. So at the end, the goal is for this project to stretch beyond the ambitions of the country's infrastructure, as I said, but we're seeing a cultural paradigm shift by oxygenating multiple fronts of the problems at stake. So looking at the urban configuration of the project itself and the analysis that we've done so far, basically the project is located basically within the city. So it's not like an airport where you would take a train to go to the center of the city. It's actually located within the urban fabric. So it gives us a really interesting boundary conditions or 3 main fronts to look at. One of it is the mountains, the other is the city, and then the third is the sea. So this idea of the triangle comes in with ideas of organizing or a site plan, but also like a top-down strategy to kind of map out some ideas and form relations using the triangle itself.
Yeah, and this is the urban analysis. And first, we want to show the boundaries, the coastline, the airport boundary, and the mountain line. And the red one is some highlights we thought maybe important to our design. And we also take the artificial land and energy plant into our design. And then some basic information: the sea, yeah, the three elements: the sea, mountain, and the city, and some routes. Yeah.
So there's quite some interesting spatial conditions within the airport itself, where there's actually two main highlighted like highways that go under the runways. So there's already this idea of layering and branching that we're sort of incorporating in our project. So as we dive deeper into the project, we aim to explore the combination of new technology and innovative design to enable more high-performance, livable, social, open, vibrant cities. In this case, high performance refers to how efficiently one uses valuable resources such as energy, water, land, and time. And livable refers to quality of life and quality of space, which basically is what the Lebanese people are lacking. And lastly, vibrant refers to creativity and activity regarding invention, commerce, exchange, and work. So we're trying to bring this into the airport. So jumping into our concept and the master plan of the project. So as we dive deeper into this project, we are looking at high performance spaces, as I said. So currently the airport is only occupying 240,000 square meters out of the 7 million, which is literally 1/30th of the overall site. So we think there's a lot of obsolete space that we're trying to kind of revitalize and provide a new program, which we'll be talking about further. But for now, this is basically some like our map of ideas originating from the tree itself, whether it's hierarchy of organization, the relationships, ideas of branching, sculptural tree, and how that actually morphs into the project itself, ideas of air, water, and earth, and how these three kind of combine to provide some kind of new change or proposal.
And we combine some of the triangle relationship to build this abstract cedar tree. And the first one is about the airport, and it's earth, water, and air. And the second one is about city. It's society, history, political, and the third one is about world. It's world, economic, and the cultural. And we want to use our airport, maybe make some small change, maybe help the city develop a little, and maybe make some small change to the world. Yeah.
So we're looking at management of flows and flow of movement of people through layering, but also using three distinct hierarchies. So the project is basically merging these three elements together, but also rethinking the border or reconfiguring the border, where you're not only taking a car and then taking to your gate and then you just take a plane and leave, which is the current situation in Lebanon, but the interconnectivity of these three main infrastructures. So some diagrams showing how the key factors of our project basically at the end produce some sort of oxygen, whether literal or metaphorical. This is our site plan of the existing site, and then this is our current state of the project. So we're basically creating new connections and relations to the existing airport and recreating the place. By looking at the type configuration of the context, we could see how like the residential areas at some point blend into the runways, in between the runways. So there's this really dense aspect from one side, but then there's also the really kind of freed up open sea, which is kind of looking at the horizon and the future, but also like providing something so vital by reprogramming the project. We're providing this whole marina / seaport area, which also includes some sort of memorial for the Beirut explosion, which was Beirut port explosion, which was very recent.
And this is the program diagram, and there are lots of programs, and there are some main parts: the seaport, the extension of the city, and the airport, and the transportation system. Yeah, and we want to use this. We build a very beautiful landscape, maybe, and give the citizens the access to get to this place easily. So we want this project to help people really, yeah. And to improve people's life. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah, so basically this REAP program is not only like connecting the city to the kind of shoreline of the whole country, but also kind of revitalizing the territories that are obsolete in the project and sort of reintegrating them and connecting them using this continuous loop or again, elevated platform or some sort of layered circulation that goes throughout the overall project. So we can see there's multiple parts, which is like a densely configured commercial zone per se, and then there's another kind of elevated platform that takes you straight to the airport. So it's all in a way connected or interconnected and intertwined. So by connecting air, land, and sea, we're looking at the management of flows, as I said, but also like looking at those in multiple lenses. So one of it is landscape, oxygen, water. Another is the airplane, hyperloop, and boats. Another one is open spaces, the activated grounds, etc. So zooming in on part of the marina, basically like what you see on the left here is the last hyperloop stop that connects the main terminal to this kind of city on the shore. It also has some sort of, we're having like ideas of like cruise liners coming in. So again, connecting airplane to boat and not necessarily car or hyperloop. And some sort of ideas on the lighthouse and the relevance of this thing, not only like locally, but as a global kind of image or, you know, a wonder basically looking at the lighthouse of Alexandria per se. Again, the red thing is what we're highlighting as the memorial for now. Hyperloop. Yeah, this is our line. And then we're going to go through this pretty quickly, but basically we mapped out some sort of diagrams of spaces that we think are essential in the project and also already existing somehow. And so we thought of this strategy to start with modeling some sort of parts and basically creating a toolkit. So referencing Tom Wiston's architecture, he basically brings all those parts together to create a whole. And similar to that notion, we're basically creating art chunks based on kind of artifacts that we find in local kind of architecture, but also building on ideas of how a tree would operate. So taking a colonnade and taking a column from that and basically translating what is literally functional use is to like a metaphorical tree, and then some sort of colonnades or spaces being created, like forests being planted in the airport. So oxygenating in different ways again. There's another chunk. Creating external shaded areas, just how a tree would do, basically canopies, another chunk. Some lights. Pattern morphing into structure, so ideas of the structural tree supporting the canopy of the terminal. And then also we're looking at the leaves and ideas of nesting volumes. These are diagrammatic for now. Another structural part. And then we're basically going to be deploying this design strategy to basically inform the organization of the project. So the ground is basically developed using combinatorial systems and a parametric object, a splash, which gives the whole kind of ground some sort of relation. And yeah, this is pretty much it. This is at the end, just showing some diagrams of the continuous flow, the layered, stacked program. Again, not necessarily highlighting not necessarily highlighting on the highline, but ideas of interconnectivity and kind of strips that connect the project together, similar to what we saw earlier. But yes, this is it for now. basically, one last message I'd like to say is that
You're muted, Hani.
can I just make one last point?
I was asking, how big is your team? 20, 30 people?
I mean, for midterm, we were just working on it, two of us, Galway and myself.
No, I mean, I think there's a ton of stuff here. I mean, obviously you guys are capable of, if that's all your work, what you guys did, then you're obviously capable of you know, planning, of foremaking, of understanding the chunks, of you know, systems. I mean, there's a lot here. There's also historic references, you know, be that lighthouses or sort of Islamic structures, domes. I mean, there's so much. I'm wondering which parts of this are the most important to you, because I could go anywhere with this in terms of a critique and trying to help you guys focus a little bit, but I'm wondering what your, I'll tell you the things that hit me the hardest or the most powerfully. I was taken a little bit by the candy coloration, the Memphis-like coloration of that one piece of the puzzle upper left, where it almost seems like there's a kind of a, some kind of a, there's so much here. Well, okay. I mean, it's just it was like a barrage of ideas and potentials, and just a couple of things. This almost looks like what I remember. My son had a Legoland video game when he was like 3 years old. It reminds me a little bit of Legoland. Their 2001 video. On the other hand, I see other things. I see the, you know, the Alexandria Lighthouse and the domes, colonnades. That's kind of a swing of the pendulum away from those candy colors and shapes. There's also the idea of the housing urbanistically, but you're not touching that housing, right? It still creeps into the runways.
Yeah, I mean, there's already so many fronts that we're tackling. We do have some sort of like affordable housing included in like
I'm
these
sure you
event
do.
parts.
I'm 100% sure you have that in here.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, if you could boil down this remarkable stew of yours to a few important ingredients, and it's getting close to lunch here now, so I'm trying to talk like this. What would they be? What are the three most important slides to you guys, or the three most important ideas that are in this that you really feel you're onto something with, or that you would like to explore further? Because obviously there's a lot of facility here. You guys, you know, you have everything from typical office generated diagrams to pretty sort of exploratory, sort of, you know, unknown formalism. You know, there's a kind of a discourse about urbanism. There's a discourse about the city. Of course, Beirut is an incredibly rich conversation in and of itself, sociopolitically. So I'm just trying to figure out where's the real, for you guys, if you were to say, like, in a very short, concise way, what the statement is you're trying to make, and what is the most important parts you've explored to get you there?
Yeah. So our goal of the project is basically to provide this place some sort of trigger for change, but also a sense of awakening for the upcoming future. So there will always be grounded, included, and evolving within the spectrum of time, similar to the icon that stands so dear to the people for millennia. So the cedar tree living out for thousands of years. We're trying to sort of provide something that would change this image of social, infrastructural oppression. So the project is about the city that's human as well as technological. So human in the context of a project stands for the identity of the Lebanese people, and turning the cedar tree and morphing it into some vital urban organism that provides oxygen on multiple fronts and in multiple ways.
So the airport as a catalyst, let me try and paraphrase and tell me if I'm wrong. the airport as a catalyst for social upgrading and a sense of human dignity in terms of place, I guess, right?
Socio-economic perspective, yeah.
Socioeconomic upgrading, and so the airport becomes, rather than being a facility that's merely there to aid in business, in economics and in commerce, it's actually a place that becomes a kind of harbinger or kind of prototype where technology and the human condition kind of symbiotically work together going into the future. Okay, good. So which parts of the project are the most salient or critical to that thesis? I mean, it's all of the above probably, but I guess.
Yeah. I think the triangle is a really strong move. So looking at the site, at least the site plan, like there's already this way of the runways being organized that sort of suggests this like pinch on one side, but then opening to the city. So it's drawing the city into the project. And then we're also suggesting some sort of hyperloop that connects it to the center of the city. That not only like opens it to, again, connecting it to the downtown per se, but opening it to public space. So ideas of social relief, like oxygen being provided to the people, and also making this kind of airport something that would provide, make Lebanon the destination point and not the point of departure. So bring people in, because that would fix all the problems that we're going through right now. Apart from the political, which is the regime that I don't know if we can overthrow with the project, but yeah.
I take it you're Lebanese?
I'm sorry?
Where are you now? Where are you working from?
I'm working in Vienna, but I was raised in Beirut and I've been in LA for a few years, but yeah.
Okay. No, I would say I was just wondering if it's, so I thought maybe you're sitting there on a Zoom session, like right in the middle of Beirut. So I think, yeah, that's interesting. So what you're saying, I guess, if I could paraphrase that, is that this triangle, although now is seen as a kind of a infrastructural, facility with housing that's creeping into it, it's actually, in your minds, a generative engine for producing oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
True?
Correct.
Okay. And to do that, you've acknowledged urbanistically that the city encroaches into the airport on that particular triangle within the triangle. You've also acknowledged that the housing will continue to move in, but you haven't really offered a solution for that. And then you have the coastal stuff and the lighthouse. Those are the three. Are those three parts of this project, or would you say it's only two?
Yes. I mean, it is three. Because one is the internal side of the triangle, and then the other is the multiple fronts of the triangle, be it the sea or the city, or actually the mountains, which is on the right, which is being chopped up right now.
The mountainside?
We don't have it in the models, but...
Or is that what that yellow box is up there?
The yellow box up here is actually a power plant that we're thinking of replacing with some sort of like renewable, not only renewable, but we had this idea of photosynthesis and how the tree could actually provide energy and cleanse the air and provide oxygen. Yeah.
So is there a triangle within the triangle? Is there a triad here between energy, commerce, and I don't know what the third one is, but it seems that there are three zones.
Society, yeah.
And that's another triangle, correct?
Correct.
If I were to connect those three.
Mm-hmm.
And so those three zones working in synchronization are somehow the production of the so-called oxygen. Is that fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. And the language that you've chosen architecturally, I mean, I've seen everything from a very naive architectural language to a very sophisticated one. I've seen the whole gamut here.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just understand the differences. I'd say the power plant, of course, is just a stand-in, so it's super naive. I'd say that the city aspect is naive with an edge. there's something interesting about it from a kind of a contemporary culture logic, I guess. And then the third one, out on the water, is more sophisticated language, almost sort of, corporate. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, because, basically, we pulled all of this since Monday till today, so we tried to do as much as we can.
Okay.
But the left part is basically was supposed to be a program diagram, so the colors are highlighting different programs, and the bottom right was just like massing, and then we couldn't do both for like the whole thing, so we did a little of each in a way. But the top left isn't necessarily like the Lego colorful stuff isn't the way the project is necessarily going to look at the end, but it's more of like an organizational system where we're producing hierarchies and relationships organize the master plan of the project.
Okay, so fair enough, and I think it's an interesting, almost encyclopedic outpouring of strategies, right? It's almost like you guys said, you know what, let's just not hold back. Let's do everything that we can think of as quickly as we can and throw it into the pool, right? And that's kind of interesting as an approach, I have to say. It's courageous. And it's actually maybe in some ways refreshing that you guys would have the courage and the guts to just say, you know what, let's put it all on the table. And that's fine. And it reminds me a little bit of, and again, I'm going to use cooking as an analogy here because I'm hungry. But, you've got all these ingredients on the table in front of you. I guess in French cooking, there's a name for that, sous something, I don't know, when you set up the whole table with all the different ingredients before you cook anything. So if you were to lay out the anatomy or the sort of, the kind of, the lexicon or the anatomy or the pieces of the puzzle here and put them all out in front of you and then start to sort of, now the refinement of putting them together becomes the problem, right? Cooking a great meal with very basic ingredients. And here the idea of pulling together a pretty interesting master plan and strategy and project with all these disparate ingredients. The one thing that's important though in all of that is what adheres them together. What's the sort of medium or the kind of storyline that actually allows all these things to collect and then have a kind of a spine or an undercurrent. And the one thing that's missing in the discourse, and you've almost covered every single, if I were to have a checklist of things that one should consider in master planning, you've almost hit all of them. But the one thing that's missing, I think, unless I missed it and you did say it, is a discourse having to do with culture, contemporary culture, and the way that culture could be a driver underneath all of this. And by culture, what I mean by that is it a technological culture? Are we talking about, are we talking about something here where everything is held together by virtue of some kind of AI-driven logistics system? Is it technological in that sense, or is it a sort of a cultural backbone that has to do with history and the city and the people of Beirut and their historic traditions? Is it also, or is the backbone to this thing, maybe it's kind of ecological and driven by some kind of statement about the environment? So in other words, I'm looking for the sort of the underpinning, or are there three underpinnings, one for each of the locations that are disparate or different, but they somehow are tied together by some kind of a logic? Mm-hmm. Because the way I read it right now is you have this, at least aesthetically, this super playful, potentially very strange, but also potentially very interesting urbanism that's encroaching from the city. And then you have this much more prosaic gateway build out that has to do with more pragmatic concerns, it seems to me. And then you haven't yet kind of sort of figure out what the third one is, or it's energy. But is there something that's, I mean, maybe just to change channels completely, is there something else that interests you guys that would be interesting to overlay onto this project? And it could be anything from robotics artificial intelligence, machine learning.
Quite interesting that,
environmental controls, museums. These are all, the reason I'm using these words very simply is that any one of those has a kind of a thematic spine would change the equation and allow you to sort of glue the whole thing together. So to use the cooking analogy again, and there's a word for it in chemistry and in cooking, there's something that catalyzes all these pieces into something else. So, for example, take the word museums. If you were to say that the catalyst here is museological, well, there is an argument that says that museums are basically the portals into culture and dignity and the understanding of people and their history and their place in history. So the intellectual reason for a museum, beyond it being a tourist draw, is really to bring the notion of centeredness to a place, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could say. Contemporary art could be a draw. I know that Beirut is a very hot and powerful contemporary art scene. So is there an art district here that's part of that? And you drive some of the galleries and the artists out to this area to instigate this kind of growth. And that's a cultural underpinning.
Mm-hmm.
So it would serve you guys well to just have a kind of an overlay discourse that because what I see in front of me are a lot of parameters, but I don't see the sort of I don't see the glue that's holding it together. And in a way, I don't think the airport is the glue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or maybe it is, and I'm getting it wrong, and you should convince me otherwise.
No, not really. But to your earlier point, also, the way we've organized or set a bunch of rules to organize the airport itself is based off of these three key factors, which is proximity, diversity, and density. And looking at cities of the past, it was very crucial that they had tight-knitted communities and sort of like really current interactions between people. So like on the ground level, there's always this sort of like exchange or interplay with people. And we also have some sort of like open like markets or souks on the ground level that kind of bring the public into the project, not necessarily if you're trying to travel, but also like having some sorts of like arts district, innovation district, a tech research district. So we're densely populating this project not only with infrastructural kind of program, let's say, but other programs that create really interesting kind of like interplay or rubbing between those different spaces that at the end kind of comes all together to produce the airport. But it's like you were saying, it's not only about traveling and stuff, but it's like the cultural and the economical.
No, I get that, and I like that, and I think that's important. I guess, okay, so this is the thing. If I were to say to you, and let me just role play here something different. Let's imagine you guys are working with me in an office environment, in my office, and we're doing this project together, and it's a kind of a master planning project we have to do. And it's commissioned. Let's say Beirut has commissioned this project. It's got, power behind it, politics behind it, money behind it, and they're telling us, please replan our airport to be, to catalyze, to bring dignity to our city, to catalyze businesses and kind of commerce, and to evolve it from being merely an infrastructural project on the outskirts of the city to actually being a generative engine for the city.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's really what you guys are saying. So if I were to turn that into kind of a practical project, and I had to give this to a presentation to the city of Beirut, like, next week, the question would be, okay, so what's the overarching theory, or not the thesis, what's the overarching concept that would be that would get buy-in? we use office terms here, corporate culture terms, to get a buy-in from stakeholders. And I think it would be to develop this as a triad and to say there are 3 zones that if you instigate these 3 zones around the airport, they together will catalyze growth. And the 3 zones, as I can read it from your drawings, are: one is a cultural zone, a cultural overlay, whatever that means. It can mean markets, galleries, contemporary art scene, whatever you want, as a cultural overlay. I don't know, for some reason, I have Emma at the top of my screen watering her plants, which is really fantastic. Oh no, she's pouring herself a drink. It's like a Dada presentation. I'm like sitting here with you guys are all still framed. I don't know why, but Emma's like pouring herself a drink. It's great. No, back to this. So there's a triad here which works symbiotically together, and one would be cultural, just to use a very overarching term, whatever that means. And it's nice that you have this colored plans. I said, you know what, make that the cultural zone, whatever that means. Then there's infrastructural, which is on the water, which would be part of this triad. So what does that mean? What is important? What are we talking about when we say an infrastructural kind of, is it a port? Is it sort of a combination of ports and hotels? Is it like, I don't know how familiar you are with places like Abu Dhabi, but they built Yaz Island and Sayed Island and all these islands on the water. They're kind of generative structures, right? So Sayed Island's all museums. Yaz Island is what raced a Formula One track, and our building and other stuff, and they did this kind of thing. So that becomes a kind of a whole different sort of zone. And then the third zone in the mountains, which is one that's missing here, may very well be nature. May have to do with recreation, well-being, health. Because and then one would ask the question: well, does the triad of health, culture, and could be entertainment, quite frankly, or in a sophisticated way, entertainment and commerce. Does that triad create enough of a chemical reaction that uses the airport in such a way? So what you do, you simplify the argument to airport is a triangle. Within that triangle is a second triangle. That second triangle has these 3 kind of important parameters of cultural of urban growth and sustenance and sustainability, and they are the catchwords are these 3 terms. That's what I would do. That's what I would tell you to do. If I were awesome. In a more dictatorial position, like I would be in my office. So the question is, does that make sense? Could you think that way? Because I think it would help you clarify these zones, help you develop a third zone, and then reduce. And that's the other word in cooking, right? Reduce this to the most important features in those areas. So it's not just everything. You show us a museum district, or you show us a cultural district, or you show us a market district, and you show how those work together. You show us an entertainment and a cargo area on the coast, and you show us a kind of, sort of whatever the well-being health condition of oxygenation from the mountains could be. And if those are the attributes of Beirut, which they are, the sea, the land, and the mountains, it becomes a kind of microcosm for the to catalyze growth and dignity and so on. And then the airport becomes a kind of a spine, or the runways and the infrastructure becomes a spine to that development. And I think you have an amazing project there. One of the virtues of throwing everything on the table is the fact that something's on the table. So I think you have to pick and choose what of these things you want to, bring to the front, and what things you'll let fade away a little bit because they're not as important.
Yep. I think that's
so even just the way you've done the markets, even at this level, the diagram of uber color and playfulness versus grays and blacks and pragmatism versus what hasn't emerged yet over there is kind of interesting, right? In that equation, because then the colors and the languages the tectonics are part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys want to sort of play around with different approaches formally, you at least have parameters by which to do that. So you can hone in on, you just say, look, these are the drivers, these are the serious drivers: health, well-being, cultural urban growth, and waterside. I'm having trouble with that one, but waterside sort of,
horizon. Something with the horizon, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you cited the gateway at Alexandria, right? The tower.
Yep.
So yeah, don't forget that the symbol of that tower that was standing at the old lighthouse of Alexandria at the same time as the Library of Alexandria was the portal to all knowledge, right? So the idea that that this is kind of a what's the equivalent of a Library of Alexandria for Beirut in a kind of a and that was really about a kind of combination. I mean, in today's language, you'd say it was entertaining, but it was really the idea of acquiring knowledge from around the world and placing it into one structure. And then you know the story, right? All the ships in Alexandria they weren't allowed to leave the port during the ancient times until all the books on board were transcribed into the Library of Alexandria. So ships were stuck in quarantine, sometimes for decades, while every book was transcribed by scribes and then put into the library, which is an amazing history, amazing story. And all of our knowledge in the West of things like algebra and certain scientific knowledge, was in that library. Were some of the things that survived the fire. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So, interesting start. And a great project, great idea to work like this and to use the airport as a generative, as a found object almost. What I like about this is you're sort of using the idea of the objet trouvé in art, right? The found object. I think that the airport is a found object. The objet trouvé, the kind of Duchamp's urinal. I don't know if you know the reference, Oppenheimer's fur teacup. It's kind of like it's the found thing, and now the embellishment of it is the strategy of inspiring growth, inspiring dignity, and inspiring health. Maybe those are the three words: growth, dignity, and health. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Interesting morning. 4 very, very interesting projects. Really terrific. Good. I wonder if tomorrow will be as good. It's a lot of pressure on the guys tomorrow.
They got an extra night.
Huh?
They got an extra night.
Yeah. Now they gotta really work. Okay, good. Thank you so much for that. I guess we will see you tomorrow. See some people tomorrow, and I guess we will have another review. What we're doing is we're trying to gauge where you guys are and trying to figure out when we would have, if we in fact do have a formal midterm, when it would be, or we just keep going. It's really we're not sort of tied to anything here. But I just wanted to, since with this COVID situation.